Today we're going to be talking about word usage and vocal delivery. Now, before we begin, I just want to clarify. When we're talking about word usage, we're actually talking about the language that you use to describe your message. When we talk about vocal delivery, we're not talking about language, but instead we're talking about how you actually say the word or you present the word. So now that we've cleared that up, let's move into the slideshow. As you read in your book, there are 4 types of delivery: manuscript delivery, memorized delivery, impromptu delivery, and extemporaneous delivery. We're going to solely focus on extemporaneous delivery because that is the preferred delivery style. Now, why is it preferred? Well, you come across as being more conversational. You're able to adapt your message to your audience's needs. You're able to understand through feedback if they understand your message. If you see that they're unclear of your meaning, then you can go back and you can reiterate or clarify your message to increase their understanding. And it also helps to maintain your audience's interest. And let me just give you a quick example again. Imagine sitting through a lecture where your instructor solely read off of their notes. They don't look up and give you eye contact. They just read through very quickly without using pauses to allow you to comprehend and understand the message. Or they're not pausing so you can write the information down. It can become very frustrating, and it can also be extremely boring. Whereas if you go into a lecture where someone is using extemporaneous delivery and they're talking to you and they're inserting examples and you're able to raise your hand and ask questions and they can clarify the message, I'm sure you're going to want to hear that lecture over a manuscript style lecture. So we're going to focus on extemporaneous delivery, or conversational delivery, if you will. Now, selecting your words. I want you to think about writing an essay. You write this eloquent essay and you turn it over to the reader. The reader starts going through. If there's a word they don't understand, they can go get a dictionary to look it up to understand the meaning more. If they quite didn't get a sentence, they can go back and reread the sentence. So there's multiple chances that they can understand your message clearly. Now, when you think about a presentation, it's completely opposite. You get one shot to get your message across. So, the way you can simplify your meaning and you can create better understanding in a presentation is to use specific, concrete words opposed to abstract words. Concrete words allows the audience member to understand completely what you're saying. It doesn't allow them to fill in their own kind of meaning behind a word. So if I was to say flower, anyone could pick a number of flowers out. Rose, tulip, daisy, so on. But if I said tulip, or even if I wanted to be very vivid and I said a beautiful, bright purple tulip, it creates an image in your mind better, so you cannot substitute meaning. You'll want to use unbiased words. Now, I'm not trying to say that you have to constantly think about being politically correct. I'm just asking you to use words that do not offend and they do not stereotype groups or individuals. So the example here, instead of saying stay-at-home mom, mom references a female. There's a lot of stay-at-home dads out there, so you wouldn't want to leave them out. So you could say stay-at-home parent. If you're talking about a surgeon, you would not constantly want to say he, because again, you're stereotyping gender into professions. If you were talking about the President of the United States, there would be no need to say, our black President of the United States, Barack Obama. The fact that he's black doesn't have anything to do with it, so it would be better to say the President of the United States, Barack Obama. You'll want to also use simple words in simple sentences. Words that the audience can easily understand. Now this is where going back to your audience makeup comes into play. If you're at a conference of professionals, and we'll say a medical conference, you would be expected to use medical jargon. But if you're talking to a patient, using that medical jargon will only confuse them. You have to break it down into terms and ideas that they can grasp. So use words and sentences that are appropriate for your audience. And usually simple words and simple sentences tend to be the best. Now, not only is your word usage important as far as creating meaning, not stereotyping, not offending your audience, but it also can create interest. And there's various ways to create interest and understanding. And the first thing we're going to talk about is kind of vivid language. When you use metaphors, similes, personification, you create these images that the audience can see to help create understanding. Now, rhythm can also create understanding, or it can create emphasis. And there are 4 ways that you can add rhythm: parallelism, antithesis, repetition, and alliteration. And I always like to say, think back to Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. He emphasizes, I have a dream. He emphasizes the idea of unity by saying little white boys and little white girls will play with little black boys and little black girls. But it's this idea that you understand the meaning because there's a lot of repetition. And it's said so frequently that you have multiple chances to grasp the concept that he's trying to get across. But here I've given a couple of examples that you can understand and you can read through. Oftentimes you create rhythm in speeches without even being aware of it. But if you are a advanced presenter, you may want to start playing around with the idea of creating rhythm, really trying to intensify or enhance your speech through parallelism, antithesis, repetition, or alliteration. So now we've talked about word usage, the language, how you need to be clear, detailed, so you can get your message across. We're going to turn our attention now to the delivery component, how you say the message. And vocal delivery is very important because if you think of the little ditty, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Most of the message is actually comprehended through your delivery. So, when you think about delivery, one, you want to have as much variety as possible. And you can do this by varying your volume, pitch, rate of speech. Now, when you think about your volume, you have to make sure the entire audience can easily hear what you're saying. If you're being very quiet and they're having to strain on every word you say to try to comprehend your message, you're going to oftentimes lose the audience. Whereas if you scream at your audience, they're kind of taken back, if you will, and they tend to tune you out, so you have to be able to find that appropriate volume. Now, the pitch is the highness and lowness to your voice, and this is specifically what allows you not to be monotone. If you've ever sat through a presentation where the person doesn't change any of their pitch and it stays a constant pitch throughout, you understand how bland and boring it can be. So varying your pitch allows that variety to come through. Then you have rate. The rate of speech allows the audience to easily follow along. And your rate of speech is how fast or slow you give the information. And it allows you to add emphasis, and it allows people to be able to process the information that you're actually discussing. So if you go through a really complicated issue, you may want to pause for a second or two just to let them kind of take it in and process what you've said. Whereas if you're trying to show excitement, you may want to speed up the rate of speech and increase your voice. All of these things can help add clarity to what you're saying. Now, articulation is very important. You need to try to fully articulate words, and you need to try to avoid using slang as much as possible. People tend to think about presentations, and they tend to think about a very professional expectation behind it. So you don't want to use a lot of slang because you then code switch, go from professional language to casual language, and it can help cause, it helps to cause some confusion, or it creates confusion. Word usage and delivery problems. I laid out some things I oftentimes see during presentations just to kind of highlight or emphasize these certain areas. And one of the top things I see happen is people using slang. They'll say y'all instead of you all, or they'll leave G's off of the end of words. I was thinking instead of I was thinking. Also, I see a lot of problems with volume. And oftentimes when people are nervous, they get a little reserved. And so their voice tends to lower. This can make it very hard for the audience to hear you. So again, practicing your volume so you can understand what is the appropriate volume you need to use. I hear a lot of monotone speeches, and they're extremely boring because they lack variety. We're not varying the pitch, the volume, or the pace of the presentation. And monotone speeches lack enthusiasm, and this goes back, if you're not interested in your own presentation, why should I be interested in it? And lastly, a very big delivery problem that I see is the use of verbal fillers and verbal hedges. They become very distracting in your presentation, where you say you're trying to gather your thought, or you start every sentence with and, or you use verbal hedges. You know, I really think that a bright purple tulip is the best thing out there. And then, you know, again, constantly using these words can be very distracting. So the best thing you can do in your practice session, when you videotape and you review yourself, look at articulation, volume. Are you being monotone? Are you using a lot of verbal hedges and fillers? If you're aware of the usage or the frequency of these things, then you can start correcting some of these problem areas through more practice so you can better your actual speech before you give it. So always remember, communication is extremely complicated, and it's not only what you say, but it's definitely how you say it.